even it's going to be like a Nutri Eval and like a Vibrant Health report combined.
Okay.
So, vitamin levels, amino acids, methylation markers, antioxidants, minerals, and healthy fats. Those are really more of like the nutritional based outcomes. And then we even have general health markers too. So it goes above and beyond just like a traditional Nutri Eval. So we're looking at metabolic markers, immune markers, bone and mineral, hormonal, neurocognitive, microbiome, inflammation, stress markers, toxins, so some of the PFAS, some of the forever chemicals, um, mitochondrial function, oxidative stress, NAD metabolism, ketones, and even supplements as well. So quantifying all of those levels to be able to say, hey, where am I deficient and where can I actually start to make a difference? Because they've looked at some estrogen supplementation too, alongside of the menopause, and that can definitely help mitigate the accelerations that we're seeing within the biological age.
Welcome to the Health Fix podcast, where health junkies get their weekly fix of tips, tools, and techniques to have limitless energy, sharp minds, and fit physiques for life. Hey, health junkies. On this episode of the Health Fix podcast, we're going to be talking about the power of epigenetics in shaping your health and how the company Tru Diagnostic is offering cutting edge insights through DNA methylation analysis to empower individuals to track their biological age and make personalized lifestyle changes that can positively influence how well they age and their overall well being. The science of epigenetics reveals that while genetics may load the gun, it's our environment and choices that pull the trigger, meaning you have the ability to rewrite your health trajectory. And so I've brought Hannah Went from Tru Diagnostic back on. She was on a couple years ago. And Hannah has quite the passion for longevity and breakthrough technologies that drive improvement to the human condition. And of course, that's what we're going to be talking about today. How can you improve your aging? Now, Tru Diagnostic has a commitment to research with over 30 approved clinical trials investigating the epigenetic methylation changes of longevity and health interventions. Since Tru Diagnostic's inception, they have created one of the largest private epigenetic health databases in the world, with over 35,000 patients tested to date. Now, Hannah also has a podcast, and it's called Everything Epigenetics, where she shares insights on how DNA regulation has an impact on your health. So today, Hannah and I are going to go through my October 2024 results and compare them to my 2022 results and talk all about the upgrades to Tru Diagnostics testing, but also we're going to go into the Duke and a couple other universities combined DunedinPACE testing and talk about Yale Symphony AGE testing and how these two tests combine are what TruAge testing from Tru Diagnostic are and how they're there to help you identify your pace of aging and what you can do to slow it down. So, this is a fascinating podcast where Hannah kind of dives in with me to show me what was going on with my aging. And thank goodness things aren't looking too bad, but there's a couple twists and turns in this podcast. So, if you're wondering how I stack up on my aging, and you're also curious about if a TruAge, Tru Diagnostic test may be something for you to look into to help with preventing things or just knowing where you stand when it comes to your aging, this is the podcast for you. So let's reintroduce you to Hannah Went. Hannah Went, welcome back to the Health Fix podcast.
Thanks, Dr. Krause. I'm excited to be here today and chat with you more.
Man, it's been a little bit. So we, of course, were catching up before we hit record. And I'm glad to have you back because I was gifted the chance to test myself again and see where things are at. And of course, you guys have changed things up. And so I had a little bit of a panic. Like I was saying, I saw that before I was 7 years younger. Now it shows I'm still younger than my actual age, but it's at a less of a rate. But when I look at all the data, it looks like things have improved except one thing, my musculoskeletal health. And we're going to talk about that today and what the heck happened. So thank you so much for coming back on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to help. I'm excited to dive into some of your results as well. It's really exciting when people have two data points, right? Because then you can start to
Mhm.
ask yourselves a question like, "Hey, what happened in between? What did I do? What can I get better at?" And I know you've had a move and have probably done things in between the tests as well. So we'll try and, work through those and see how or why you improved. We can even talk about some of the differences within like the epigenetic clocks to the biological age outcomes and like why we made some of those report changes as well.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So guys, stay tuned. We'll get there. I want to definitely bring up like what is this test all about? What markers are we using? Because the true age really let's put it this way, it's very clear looking at the organs and it helps me to really see what's going on. But the true age is really a combination of algorithms, correct? So give us the scoop as to what we're looking at with the combination.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, aging is so complicated. It's so exciting, but I think we'd be naive to think like, oh, there's this, one biological age that rules them all, right? It's like tells us about our destiny and where we're supposed to end up in life and what diseases we would get, et cetera. We just know that's not true, right? We're aging at a cellular level. Each individual cell in your body is having its own kind of biological age ticking clock too. So what we do at True Diagnostic with this kind of you mentioned an individual or different biological age clocks is give you a good handful of them to use synergistically or together to then make a recommended interventional treatment plan or protocol afterwards too. So we really have three that I think excel at this. We have our OMICm Age that stands for looking at the inner like looking at how your multi-omic is functioning from a part of your body. So inner working clinical lab values, metabolites, and proteins through an aging score. That was one we created with Harvard. We then have the one you mentioned called Symphony Age. So this is the aging of 11 different organ systems we just released. It's a really, really cool kind of set of ages. We have your metabolic age, brain age, immune system, hormone, heart, kidney, inflammation, liver, lung, musculoskeletal, and blood. So again, you start to get a little bit more targeted in those treatment recommendations because you can see where you're aging the fastest, and that one we created with Yale. And then I think my favorite and one we were chatting about just a little bit ago before we hopped on is that pace of aging metric, right? The DunedinPACE one we created with Duke and Columbia University. That's just a different kind of measurement. It's more of a speedometer, right? How quickly you're aging biologically for every one chronological year.
Yeah. Yeah. And that one, was one that when I first saw it, I was like, oh, I'm not doing that great. But then when I compared it to before, I was like, oh, wait, I have improved. And it's crazy how you look at it and you're like, you go right to the negative. What's up with us humans?
Yeah, you really do. I think again, looking at all of them, looking at them longitudinally, just like you did, is really key to start to say, okay, well, how are these clocks moving? What am I doing? What am I feeling? And where do I want to go in the future? Right? I hope you take it in, 3 or 4 months, or 6 more months, so we can start to even look at those trends a little bit further.
Yeah. Well, and this is kind of where things have kind of evolved, right, with my practice and definitely looking at aging and trying to help folks really understand where to focus on their health. Because I think for a lot of us, if we're more or less feeling okay, maybe we're a little tired, maybe we're feeling a little bit like run down, maybe we're not sleeping as great, but we're like, yeah, overall, I'm pretty good, but I would like to make it better. This makes sense to do.
Yeah, yeah, and I think when True Diagnostic opened about 4.5 years ago, I did see that a lot, right? People who were like already optimized, they did all the blood work, they have their hormones in check. They're like, what's next? What's the next greatest, biggest thing? And then it kind of comes back to aging, right? I already feel good, but what's that one thing I could measure, that one thing I could work on? And again, aging being that number one risk factor for all cause mortality and morbidity, it's a great place to, end up at after you've, optimized or tried to optimize everything else. But more recently, I see healthcare providers doing this on their patients right when their patient walks in the door, which is really cool because they're like, wait a second, we want to see the change all the way from maybe that unhealthier version of you to optimization. And those results can look really, really nice over time.
Well, it makes a lot of sense because I think when we're working on lots of interventions, I mean, the biggest thing I hear from a lot of people is, am I making progress, right?
Hmm.
How do I know? I didn't necessarily come in feeling bad, right? And so a lot of people are like, well, I don't know, am I making progress? Am I not? But if we do come in, have folks come in who are really trying to rejuvenate their health and revive themselves, then I mean, this would be like a great thing to look for to see like, okay, where are our efforts working and where do we need to put more efforts?
Yeah, and I think that's where we are today with a lot of the outcomes on the reporting too, right? When you first took the test, the insights were rather limited. We didn't really give you recommendations. It was kind of you had a couple ages, you were either older or younger, and you're like, yeah, okay, well, now what? I'm older or I'm younger. It was kind of like a novelty, but it gave you very limited insight, let's say, into your aging process. Whereas now, with kind of integrating different layers from the multiome, integrating different organ system levels, we're actually able to pinpoint and be and say, okay, well, you're aging a little bit faster because of this. Let's try these lifestyle factors or these supplementations, or maybe it's even medication or like a procedural based therapy, like hyperbaric oxygen chamber therapy, or therapeutic plasma exchange, right? Some of those larger and interventional treatment plans. And that could be, worked out with your healthcare provider. I definitely recommend taking the test through a healthcare provider who's trained in this area, just because they're going to, first off, know you best, but know the test interpretation best too.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. I think a lot of people might be thinking right now, like, okay, so you mentioned the Dunedin, you mentioned you worked with Harvard, or not Harvard, sorry, with Yale, and then you worked, we've got Duke. Now, how do Harvard probably has to come in here somewhere, I'm guessing, since we've got all
We
the.
work with Harvard too. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so there is, yes, that's right. There's the Harvard and the Biobank too. Okay, so I wasn't completely off, but I'm like, you've got all the top universities there. Um, but I think a lot of people might be thinking like, okay, so this is DNA, and we're running algorithms on the DNA. Now, help us to understand the algorithms here. We're working off of methylation on some, and so give us kind of the background so folks can understand like what's actually being looked at as the
Yep.
basis for the algorithms.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're quite literally looking at your genetic expression levels, right? Think of it almost like not necessarily a light switch, but a light dimmer, where you can have these different expression levels of your genes. That's called DNA methylation, essentially looking at a CH3 group, a teeny tiny carbon, and three hydrogens. And if that's present, your gene expression is turned off. But if that is not present, you're unmethylated, that gene expression is turned on. So it's a balance. I always say, hey, we want to shift our methylation markers in our favor. It's not the goal of having all of our genes turned on, right? Or all of our genes turned off. We definitely want to pick and choose the good and bad ones regarding how they actually function later on downstream. So that's what we're measuring here in our lab in Lexington, Kentucky. It's just a finger prick blood spot card. We're going to use a blood sample because that's where these algorithms have been trained and validated in as well. But to your question, well, how do you actually create these algorithms or these clocks? We look at about 1 million positions of those DNA methylation positions on your sample. And the more other biological information that we stack on top of that, like clinical lab values in the training, proteins, metabolites, different functional markers as well, like VO2 max, FEV1, grip strength, gait speed, right? We'll pour everything, all these markers into the training, so then we can actually impute those outcomes just through the lens of DNA methylation or epigenetics itself. So the more information, right, the better. And we partner with people like Harvard, you mentioned in their biobank too, because you need that outcome data,
Mhm.
right? So say, for example, we take a 20-year-old from the biobank, we have their methylation data from that point, and then they passed away at 80 years old from a cardiac event, right? At what point in their life did their methylation markers change? And how can we use those to then predict, say, a cardiovascular risk marker at some point?
Wow. It's so
Yeah.
fascinating how much access we have to all of these things and how we can use it for our health. And I know a lot of people, DNA, when we first talked about it way back and a couple of years ago, folks were kind of still a little bit like, oh gosh, I don't know if I want to use my DNA. I don't know if I want to, give it up and get some info. But I mean, I'll be honest, like I do a lot of DNA testing too. And it's hard to really get like with all the SNPs, like, okay, I can see the info, but I can't, it's hard to like guess how someone's going to age with it, right? Like you don't know, like, is something really going to happen? Is it happening? So this is a great way to pair the DNA testing to see your genes and then also pair it with this to see like what's actually coming true for you. I guess you could say, what's your epigenetic?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, what's actually coming true for you. And you mentioned, yeah, you don't really know how someone's aging. I mean, there's correlation, right, with grip strength, gait speed, cognitive function, and even facial aging with a lot of the biological age clocks, but you really just don't know. And I do think it's great to pair the epigenetic testing with your genetic testing. Myself, for example, I've had my genetic testing done. I have the APOE34 variant. My grandmother passed away from Alzheimer's. I have a 20% increase chance of being diagnosed and at an earlier age as well. So that's like so scary to me, right? It's not going to change though. That's just my genetics. However, that's is what it is, right? It's just a genetic predisposition and risk. It's not my epigenetics, which is actually modifiable. So there are a lot of studies out now, of course, talking about lifestyle factors you can do to help lessen that risk of Alzheimer's, but also even things like estrogen therapy too, and supplementation to reduce that risk or that genetic variant. So yeah, there's a lot of really cool connections and like ways these fields, both epigenetics and genetics play together. I think it makes for a really, really great combo offering on someone.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking about it, lately, just kind of looking back at my DNA testing and then looking back at this and going like, oh wow, wild, wild. So
Mhm.
I, of course, want to dive into my results so that folks who are listening will give you a good audio version of it. If you want to see it, I'm going to have it over on YouTube at my channel there, the Health Fix Podcast. So I want Hannah to kind of go through my results with me and we'll kind of like talk about what's showing up. I can give you I have no shame. I'll tell you what's going on in my life and what's changed. In fact, I'm excited to show it because things have improved. So it makes me happy to be able to show it. So let me quick do a screen share here. So we're going to take a second. So here's my report, and it's me. You can see my name here for those of you who are watching it visually. Yes, I'm 46 years old at the time of this recording. I have no shame about my age either. And so here's the like how tell me how to say this and what
Mhm.
this means for folks between my chronological age, which is 46.22, and my
OMICm
OMIC,
Age.
OMICm
Yeah,
age,
this looks
45.
so good. Anyone who is younger, just biologically, like should be happy and should be impressed. It's not easy to do, right? Like we're doing things all the time that make us age quicker. I mean, even just in America, right? Kind of the 9 to, 5 p.m., 6 p.m., right? Work week and high stress a lot of times that we put ourselves in our environment. So we traditionally expect people to age a little bit quicker, but you're younger, so this is something you should definitely be proud of. Keep in mind, men in general age quicker than women. So, for those listening who are male, you die younger, you age quicker than women. You may see these numbers a little bit more accelerated. We definitely do from a populational based standpoint.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And this is where I kind of panicked because last time I was 7 years younger and now I'm just a little hair under a year younger. But so for folks who heard my previous podcast, the algorithm was changed, correct? In terms
Hmm.
of that, just so folks can hear that it's not like I've now only been less than a year, it's different algorithm.
Yeah, yeah, and really that gets into the kind of the creation of these biological age clocks and epigenetic clocks as we were talking about earlier. Those previous ones we had were first generation clocks. So they were really just trained off of chronological age and DNA methylation. As we mentioned, this one right here is called a second generation clock. It's actually trained off of your metabolites, your proteins, your clinical lab values, and methylation as well. Mhm.
Nice. So, of course, I'm competitive and you have the Rejuvenation Olympics and things of that nature. What's like the running like person right now? How
Oh,
much younger are they than their chronological age? Who's on top?
yeah. The Rejuvenation Olympics just really quantifies that pace of aging metric,
Okay.
because it is so good at capturing change in a very short amount of time. And I think the person in first place has like a point, I want to say it's like 0.56 or something like that too. If you go to rejuvenationolympics.com, you'll be able to see it. And to be at the top or like verified with the blue check mark, you need three DunedinPACE test over the last 2 years. So yeah, I think it's around that.
Wow. You might have gamified this for me to see what.
Yeah, we're getting into that competitive head of yours, that spirit.
Yep, definitely for sure. So we have this one, and then if we move down, here we have the actual kind of number here, and if you can explain this here a little bit for folks.
Yeah, definitely. So it's again going over, hey, your OMICm age is lower than your calendar age by about a half a year. You see that little smiley face there. You're doing a great job. And then your OMICm age is actually lower than about 45% of people too. Same age compared to female. So you're doing really well against the population right around average.
Score. I want to be above average, so we're gonna have to work on that.
Mhm.
So if we look down here, we can see kind of what showed up before for me, and I was a lot different in 2022 in terms of age, as a whole. But
Mm.
as we'll see below, organs are vastly different in terms of aging. So we'll have folks kind of see this difference is from me before and me now.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And the Symphony Age is one that we absolutely love. Again, it was an approach looking into individual organ systems. This talks about the idea of heterogeneity, right? We all don't get liver disease or heart disease at the same age. We know our organs are ticking at these different rates, and that's exactly what this clock does too. So, you can see here, kidneys look good, you're aging slowly, lungs look great, um, inflammation looks good, hormones, liver, aging slowly on all of these. You have metabolic aging slower. Oh, and here we have the ones that are aging faster. Um,
Yeah.
brain just a little bit, blood just a little bit faster, immune just a little bit faster, heart just a little bit faster. Musculoskeletal is definitely what's bringing that kind of like, average of all of the scores up together, right? So this is interesting. The musculoskeletal score. So this is trained off of a lot of like musculoskeletal, I guess, based biomarkers, vitamin D3, for example, IGF-1, arthritis, height, weight, BMI, and then a ton of mobility metrics as well, like balance time test, grip strength, like even recollection or charting of like previous back problems or like kind of how you carry weight, right? Some of seven different functional tests, combination of individual balance tests and grip strength, stair climbs, tandem balance test, all the above.
Wow. Which is so fascinating because I am a workout junkie. I lift weights all the time, right? So for me, it goes and balance and agility and all those are all my jam. But I'm like, I wonder, since I did this test before, I herniated my L5S1 disc. And I'm like, I wonder if that threw off like a huge thing in my body.
Oh, yeah, so my first question to you was like, were you hurt? That was gonna be my next question. Like, were you hurt? Um, had some like more mobility issues. Obviously, that's, cannot feel great. Probably took some time off, right? As well. Do you know when did you hurt that, compared to when you took this test?
It would have been actually 2 years ago, but I've had on and off flares.
Oh, okay. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Was it the situation just pretty bad? What did it put you down for a while or?
Yeah, yeah. So we think I mean, I've been powerlifting for years, probably
Yeah.
started some things back then, but we were re-roofing the back side of our house when we first moved in 2 years ago. And I think that at that time, what happened is just carrying the shingles up the ladder is what
Oh,
set things off.
okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, to see this, I was like, and that's like my big thing, in addition to blood
Yeah.
and circulation, which baffles me.
Yeah. Yeah. The musculoskeletal age itself, what's really cool about these individual systems ages essentially is they're super predictive of individual morbidities, right? We look at that OMICm age, and the OMICm age is like a lifespan predictor. Think of this as more of like a health span predictor, right? So for musculoskeletal, it's super predictive of physical function, just total comorbidities in general, and then diabetes and arthritis as well. I'm wondering if you have any like family history of like diabetes or arthritis too.
Yeah.
Because again, I mean, we're picking up an epigenetic signal, but even epigenetics to an extent can have some type of like genetic, right, connection too.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Arthritis is a thing. However, my 88-year-old father is so mobile, it's like out of control. He was helping us roof the house and
Oh,
like
no way.
bend and like he's incredible. My mom didn't live long enough. She passed at 62 of breast cancer. So I don't really know on her end, but I do know my mom's family diabetes. My dad's side, my dad's had a quadruple bypass. So there is cardiovascular stuff, which makes me wonder, like, okay, my heart's aging faster, my blood, what should I be looking at here? Like, what do I do?
Yeah, yeah. Blood is an interesting one. The biomarkers that are going to be measured in, the blood age are going to be your like think of like a CBC, right? Your ferritin, hematocrit, hemoglobin, mean corpuscular hemoglobin, red blood cell distribution width, red blood cell count, platelet count. The blood age in particular is predictive of leukemia and cataract, interestingly enough. Um, but your blood age isn't like super old by any means, right? You're just a little bit elevated there. So if you had your bloods taken around that time too, definitely something to dig into.
Well, it's definitely like a red like flag for me, especially that musculoskeletal. That freaks me out. I'm like something I've got to change something here in terms of my body and you know, yeah, I've got to figure that out. So
Yeah.
anyway, I find it fascinating as to like what happened here and like literally if we look at from 2022 to 2024, out of all of the things, the biggest jump was
Yeah.
musculoskeletal. And I'm like, wow, what in the heck?
And you got injured, you said 2 years ago after you took the first test?
Yes.
Yeah. That's crazy. I wonder, I mean, obviously there's a connection there, right? Interesting. Yeah.
Absolutely. I find it interesting too that like when I look at things across the board, I am besides the musculoskeletal um and blood, really most things are actually looking better for me.
Yeah.
Some stay kind of similar, but really looking across the board, I'm like, okay. So the move was good for me, but my heart, my musculoskeletal and blood need a little TLC.
Yeah, yeah. Most of it went down though. Yeah, it
Yeah.
looks pretty good. So I think just working on that musculoskeletal age, doing a little bit of a deeper dive there, and I'm sure it gets better every single day too regarding your back. But yeah, super interesting.
It is, but it's a good wake up call. It's funny because it's the three things I talk about: circulation a lot on my podcast with my patients, keeping our muscles strong, working on our muscles, and then working on the heart and cardio and like HRV. So it's hilarious that those would be the three. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess like I'm working on myself too,
We all are. We all are.
right? So let's move on to the Dunedin Pace here and talk a little bit about this guy here.
Yeah, yeah, I love the DunedinPACE. This is an awesome clock. This is the one we worked on with Duke and Columbia University. It's different, as you can see. You're like, wait, this is like a ratio, or what does it really mean? So, this tells you how quickly you're aging biologically for every one chronological year. So this looks great. You're at zero point 0.8. It means you're aging zero point 0.8 biological years for every one chronological year. Obviously, you want to be as low as possible here. Again, this is pretty famous regarding the Rejuvenation Olympics that we have, a competition where you're comparing these scores with other people and just trying to compete to get it as low as possible. So this one is really responsive in short periods of time. People even do this like every 8 weeks, or 12 weeks if you really, really wanted to start dialing down and trying to slow your aging. This is a really, really great clock.
Wow. Wow. Well, I looked at that and of course I was still hung up on the 7 years, but I did notice that my results over time, I was at 0.92 before. So,
Okay, yeah, you went down. Yeah, I mean, a lot of your ages went down. It would make sense that this is a little bit lower as well. So I wish like it would have been interesting to see when your injury happened, right? And where your Jannine Pace would have been there. So this is absolutely one if you're like really dialing in on the aging stuff you want to do a little bit more consistently, just so you have those data points.
so important. So important. Now, here's one thing I would love for you to talk about, and I'm gonna stop my share here, is that pace greater than one and the
Yeah.
increased risk of death. Tell us more about that. Like, that's scary.
Yeah, yeah, it is. So again, all of these aging markers are going to be, really predictive of mortality and morbidity. For example, that OMICm Age can really predict death with a 92% accuracy rate, whereas chronological age is just 72%, right? Chronological age is still going to be predictive of death itself, right? Because we know as we get older, we are developing these diseases, and we're more likely to pass away. And same thing with the Dunedin-Pace, essentially, right? It's just another biomarker indicating, hey, if this is above one, like if you're aging faster biologically every year for every one chronological year, um, you have about a 50% chance for mortality and morbidities in the next 7 years. One's 54%, the other is 56. So we really want to do whatever we can to keep that below one. I think that's super, super important. And actually, caloric restriction seems to be working the best on Dunedin-Pace. We really need to go and validate a lot of these kind of therapies through large clinical trials, but there was a caloric restriction trial posted a couple years ago, showing a pretty significant decrease in the Dunedin-Pace.
Well, with intermittent fasting and those things showing benefit, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? And I think a lot of people are starting to realize that. And well, with the success of the GLP-1s, we might be having a lot of folks, being able to drop their caloric intake, using medications and maybe get themselves a couple more extra years in life here. But all that being aside, I'm a naturopath, so obviously I'm kind of trying to figure out how to do things naturally and where to go about this. Now, of course, let's use my example since they were there. We have musculoskeletal, we have the blood, we have the heart. What kind of things would you be thinking for folks in terms of interventions? What kind of things would you be kind of talking about for folks to look into on the
Yeah. I know we went over the musculoskeletal biomarkers that we
yeah,
have in the blood. Let's go over the heart real quick. So,
yeah.
this would be interesting to pick your brain about too. So, the heart biomarkers include shortness of breath while awake, um, components of another clock actually called Grim Age, which is a super great predictor for just mortality. Previous high blood pressure, previous heart attack, previous stroke, homocysteine, and BMI as well.
Mhm.
And the heart age is really predictive of physical function, total comorbidities, coronary heart disease, diabetes. It does a good realm of disease prediction. So yeah, we're seeing a little bit of a theme here, I would say, in terms of a couple biomarkers I may just check
Mhm.
in on. So, for example, the homocysteine within the heart calculation, the vitamin D within the musculoskeletal, and then all the blood-based values, I would say as well, with those biomarkers. So definitely, again, this isn't a replacement for your traditional lab test, right? Or blood-based values. So looking into all of those that I just named, IGF-1 was another one on there as well. Um, do you have an MTHFR variant?
I do
You,
not.
oh,
Yeah,
you do not.
negative,
Okay, okay.
negative for both of those.
Okay, perfect. I thought you were shaking your head. Yes. I was like, Yeah, no, okay, perfect. And then yeah, I think physical function, right, is something I think to watch too. So you mentioned you're a power lifter usually, right? Are you doing a lot of aerobic based exercise too?
I do sprint training twice a week.
Oh wow, good for you.
Sticking with. I haven't been doing the long. I used to do marathons for years and years. If
Yeah.
I look at like what was I doing in 2022 compared to now, I was probably running a little bit longer of distances then.
Okay.
So it makes me wonder a little bit if maybe that could be a little bit of something here.
It could. Yeah, yeah. And again, I think really focusing on, just you mentioned, being a naturopath, really wanting to solve this holistically more, right? I think is such a good point. So we always see lifestyle factors moving the needle the most. I mean, the four main ones, of course, being your stress, your sleep, your nutrition, and your exercise. And I think that's just a really, really good starting point. Outside of that, you can do an evaluation on your alcohol patterns in terms of consumption, right? Smoking status. Insulin sensitivity is huge as well, I would say. And then like toxicity, right? So reducing toxins by all means if you can, right? We can't be perfect in every category, but I know you're a super healthy person, in and of itself, right? You practice what you preach. So yeah, I don't know. The musculoskeletal one is really, really throwing me off. How many days a week do you power lift?
So I'm lifting about 4 days a week with the light lift on one of the days, and like I've kind of come off of powerlifting since
Okay,
the injury, so it's more like looking out there. I've got like a rack, so I'm doing like squatting and deadlift, and but
sure.
not super heavy, and I've got a cable. Um,
Okay.
if anything, from 2022 till now, I've backed off on
You've backed off. Okay.
such heavy, but I do heavy, just not as heavy.
Yeah, yeah. I would say that's probably a good thing. To be honest, and was probably what was something I was going to, recommend. Sometimes we do see, really great athletes having some faster biological aging as well, usually causing just maybe an overload of oxidative stress, right? An overload of inflammation in the body too. So I'm wondering if there's a connection there with the musculoskeletal, but definitely the injury, I think, is why we're seeing that musculoskeletal age so high. And I wonder how long it will take to actually get that to go down too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely gonna be one of my missions. So I'm like, we will have to do a follow-up on this
Yeah, we do need to test.
to see what happens here. Cause yeah, there's definitely some new things in the works for me actually since seeing this, but also I've already just known I needed to change things
Yeah.
just in terms of the injury and pain and whatnot. And I think for a lot of people looking at things like this, they may be thinking like, okay, I have a pretty significant family history of heart disease. I have a pretty
Mm.
significant family history of different, blood conditions. Let's call it blood conditions, not in terms of leukemia, but more like blood conditions in terms of insulin resistance, things of that nature. And I'm going through perimenopause, which
Yeah.
which is something that like also really started to hit in the last about year and a half where I really started to have symptoms. And so I don't know if you've seen any correlations there. Anybody's talked about it with you at all.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, perimenopause, going through menopause, you're definitely going to accelerate some of those biological age clocks. It's they have I would say a good handful, a good chunk of studies on it. But I think they definitely need more. I think they can have more. But we do know that that speeds up the aging process. So if we can delay menopause by any chance, or help and reduce some of the strength of those symptoms, I would say as well, the better you're going to look from just an epigenetic age standpoint too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I didn't start any estrogen replacement till
Hmm.
recently, so I'm very curious as to what that's going to look like too.
Yeah.
So, just something I bring up for a lot of folks who may be sitting here thinking like, "Oh man, everyone talks about all the estrogen receptors in the heart and in our blood vessels. Like, could this
Yep.
be part of
Yeah.
it?"
Yeah. That definitely could be it. So yeah, they've looked at some estrogen supplementation too, alongside of the menopause, and that can definitely help mitigate the accelerations that we're seeing within the biological age. Mhm.
So, something to see there. Sounds like a cool research study where we had like a big group of folks that are doing these and before hormones and after. Be
Oh, I would love that. Yeah, absolutely.
really cool to see. So. Overall, I'm really glad that I had the chance to do this again to really see what was going on. And I think for a lot of people, this may be super interesting to be like, well, you know, how can I incorporate this into my regular testing, kind of like alongside, like you were mentioning, the CBC, the cholesterol, things of that nature. It seems like it would go hand in hand there too, as like we would do biannual or quarterly,
Mhm.
assessments.
Yeah. Yeah. I see healthcare providers who are super successful with this are doing just that, right? Where they're doing the traditional lab values, like maybe the genetics and the epigenetics all at the same time. Um, set up a follow-up appointment, go through all of those, start making recommendations and, educating the patient about their choices, right? What they're doing and how those are actually affecting the metrics. And then following up biannually. You could even do it a little bit sooner. You could do it a little bit longer, depending on how well you think you know your body. And then once you start more frequently, you can start to, wait a little bit longer to do the test in between one another. But I think that's a great point and something I'd absolutely recommend for anyone interested in taking the test. Really go all in and take them all and see how everything is correlating with one another to get the best insight and best use.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So, of course, we've seen some updates since the first time I took the test. What's next for you guys? What are you working on? What's the latest and greatest that's possibly coming?
Oh, we just released a new product last week from the time we're recording this. So it's called True Health. It's basically like a vitamin antioxidant reporting panel. So we're super excited again about the ability for epigenetics to report out other biomarkers, right? Not just aging itself. So we'll see how people like the True Health report. I know healthcare providers and those that I've talked to with it about already are starting to love it because again, you're able to get all of this information with just a finger prick blood spot card.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah.
Sending someone to a lab, finding a mobile person to do a draw can be a pain, but also the finger poke, we said once we talk some people through it, they can do it. Um,
Yeah.
cool. So with that, are we looking at like instead of a general blood test where like like a metabolic panel, this is very similar to a metabolic panel like NutriVal or something like that?
Yep.
Like give me a little background on what is close.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. So it's going to be more of that Nutra Eval style. It's going to be like a Nutra Eval and like a Vibrant Health report combined.
Okay.
So vitamin levels, amino acids, methylation markers, antioxidants, minerals, and healthy fats. Those are really more of like the nutritional based outcomes. And then we even have general health markers too. So it goes above and beyond just like a traditional Nutra Eval. So we're looking at metabolic markers, immune markers, bone and mineral, hormonal, neurocognitive, microbiome, inflammation, stress markers, toxins. So some of the PFAS, some of the forever chemicals, um, mitochondrial function, oxidative stress, NAD metabolism, ketones, and even supplements as well. So quantifying all of those levels to be able to say, hey, where am I deficient and where can I actually start to make a difference? Because again, epigenetics is it's kind of like an HbA1c for everything, right? Where you're capturing more of like a 3 to 6 month running average, which is going to be more all inclusive in terms of determining your health outcomes. So we're super excited about this panel, and people can even combine, the TruAge and True Health tests and do it in just one blood spot card too.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah,
huge. That's huge.
yeah,
I'd be all in on that. That gives us so much information.
yeah. When you retest, we'll have to have you do the True Health one too.
Oh, I'm in. Sign me up. That
You're
sounds
in.
amazing. Yeah, and then I can see kind of where things are at there too. I love it. It's just a great way to kind of bring everything together and all in one place and not multiple tests. I think that's where folks are getting a little bit with this optimization department trying to figure out all the tests. And so this is great.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're super excited.
Well, we better tell folks where they can find you guys, how they can get connected, get a test, or find a practitioner, and go from there.
Yeah, if anyone's interested, just try it. I promise you'll like it. It's TruDiagnostic.com. TRU diagnostic is singular. If you have any questions or you need to find a practitioner, just reach out to support@TruDiagnostic.com. And I have my Everything Epigenetics channel too, if anyone's ever interested in learning a little bit more about epigenetics.
Awesome. Yes, that's fun. I've tuned in before and learned a lot.
Yeah.
So, guys, if you're geeking out here and you're enjoying this, go check Hannah out over there and everything epigenetics, and no doubt you will be blown away. Thank you again for coming on. I sincerely appreciate it, and for letting me do another test and being able to update myself and everybody here as to what's going on with me and how we can use me as a tool to help everybody else.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Krause.
Hey, fellow health junkie, thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening.